All right, looks like we hit steady state. Welcome everybody to this ACAPS session. This is, I think, going to be the last of the webinars for this year's cycle, and the focus of tonight is to really just lay out some of the expectations moving forward related to interview offers and kind of the interview season. We have three expert panelists from ACAP. We have the president of ACAPS, Dr. Bob Weber, the president-elect, Dr. Bill Cruzan, and then one of the vice presidents, Dr. Amanda Gossman, all of which are probably familiar as well if you were with us back in either March or April when this whole thing kicked off. We'll also have the opportunity, obviously, for you to ask any of the questions through the chat and question answer function, which Deborah and I will monitor and then kind of pass around the answers as we have the opportunity here. So with that, Amanda, I will turn it over to you to talk a little bit about how the interview rollout works. And I'm going to share that slide so that it's up there.
Awesome. Thank you. So just to give a little bit of background on this policy, we trialed this last year for the first time due to a lot of concern on the part of applicants that it was a very stressful period, that people were surgically attached to their phones waiting to read emails or get calls for interviews, and that we were trying to figure out a way to kind of make a universal and controlled manner for release of interview invitations. So we did this last year, and we surveyed it very closely, both immediately after it happened and then throughout the year and then after the match. And overall, for both programs and for applicants, it was a very positive process. So basically what will happen is that now that the ARS applications are live and the programs are reviewing them, we will have a synchronized release of interview invitations, and that will be on December 4th. And to accommodate for the time change, it would, for the coordinators who really bear the brunt of this synchronized process, that the interviews are supposed to go out no earlier than noon Pacific time or 3 p.m. Eastern time. Then after that occurs, you will have the entire weekend to contemplate what you want to accept or not accept. And we request that nobody calls or emails to schedule anything, because scheduling will not start until the following Monday at 8 o'clock Pacific time or 12 p.m. Eastern time, at which point the coordinators again will be bearing the brunt of this fire hose of emails and phone calls to schedule people for their interviews. There will be multiple rounds of interview invitation releases. We do ask programs to release their second round no later than December 18th, so that there isn't this kind of prolonged waiting period. We are just hopeful that this will, although it's kind of like a lot of stress on one day, hopefully, you know, over time, as we saw last year, will make it less stressful over the entire season and allow you to kind of hopefully enjoy other aspects of your life at that point in time. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this, but you know, we did have a couple programs that maybe weren't as clear last year. We were hoping for 100% compliance this year, since this will be the second year. But there is a possibility that a program will reach out to you early. And if that does happen, you know, we are interested in knowing we're not going to get them in trouble. We're just trying to improve our communication process so that we can really be as fair as possible to all of you. So happy to answer any questions that may have arisen.
Amanda, to put you on the spot, but I think you know the data. Last year, what percentage of interview offers came out in later rounds? Do you know?
I don't know it off the top of my head. I can probably try to pull it up, but it was a smaller percent. And you know, so what happened is that, you know, there was applicants that, maybe came in with a little bit stronger application got more interviews immediately. And then there was, I think it was probably somewhere like around maybe 20% or something. So it was less, but there was a significant amount of turnover.
So the next question is, should an applicant expect to receive all of their first wave invites on December 4th, i.e. they won't be coming in, over the weekend? Or what's your expectation in what happened last year?
So what the coordinators are trying to do is kind of get like everything lined up for that time period, and within that short remainder of that afternoon, send out all the first round invitations on that day, December 4th.
Yeah. I think there was a question, just clarifying. I think one of the slides had a 4-hour time difference between Pacific Standard Time and Eastern Time. I'm going to show that slide again real quick, just because I think
is there a typo in the math?
Someone's pointing out a typo. So let me just pull that up so that we can. I think it's in the second part of the scheduling by the program coordinators.
Yeah, there it is. One other thing for the applicants, and I don't know if they heard Amanda when she said this clearly, but one of the reasons why this is not a mad dash on Friday to immediately contact the programs is because programs have been instructed only to offer the number of invitations for which they have slots. So if a program intends to interview 10 people, they're not supposed to be sending out 20 invitations and then the first 10 show up. So applicants do have that time, because if they've been offered an invitation, then that program does have a slot. It may not be on the exact day, but you do have an interview slot. You don't have to say, oh, I need to answer right away or I lose that.
Right, and I would clarify, thank you for pointing out that typo on the first slide, that it is supposed to be 8 a.m. Pacific time when most program coordinators will be starting to, schedule interviews. So that would be 11, apologize for that typo, 11 a.m. on Eastern time. And I agree with Bob that, they may not everybody will, be scheduled exactly on that day, but there may be some of that lag. But if you got an invitation to that program, then, you will have the opportunity to be scheduled for an interview. So if that interview is not scheduled at 8 a.m., it doesn't mean that you're not going to get an interview there. So please just be a little bit mindful of the coordinators, because they really kind of bear the brunt of this mad kind of process of coordination. So, even if it may happen Monday or Tuesday or at some point, within that time frame, but you can email them and say you're happy, you want to schedule. And there's be different language within the invitations from the different programs, and we'll be kind of sending recommendations for that.
Matt, I think a number of the programs, didn't they, they sent out, if they had, let's just say they had a December 1st and December 2nd, I recognize those dates don't work, interview, a number of programs only sent out the same number of December 1st and December 2nd to the students. And then if you couldn't make that, you could kind of go on the wait list for the other one. So it wasn't this mad rush. Like, they basically said, this was the date that you're offered. I know other programs did it differently, but some programs did it that way as well.
Right, and we'll be circling back with the programs themselves so that we can give them recommendations for how to kind of word those letters of invitation. And it's some programs assigned you to a certain date. Excuse me. Some of them gave you the option for choosing a date, but all of that is flexible. And if you're given an invitation, it's really, you're going to just have to decide, that there may be some conflicts, so you may have to choose. And I know, looking at the numbers, that applicants applied to even more programs than usual this year. So, likely for some applicants are going to have to decide for programs that have conflicting dates.
So there's another question. So should scheduling interviews on Monday, not immediately as we receive the invite? Am I understanding that correctly?
That's 100% correct. Please do not respond to the invitation on Friday or Saturday or Sunday. Just like take the weekend, think about how, what you want to prioritize. You can always look on the ACAPS website for the dates of different interviews if it's not clear from their letter, and kind of make a plan. And then you can reach out to the program coordinators on Monday.
So there's a question if programs are going to be using the ERAS scheduler, or will they be communicating with program coordinators to confirm scheduling?
I think that's probably going to depend on the program. That should be clarified in the invitation letter, but most likely the program coordinator would be involved. But if some programs are using the ERAS scheduler, then they would indicate that in their invitation letter.
Will there be a cap on the number of interview invites offered and accepted? So I'm not sure if that's regarding the programs, which I think we answered, or if that's an answer about the number of interviews a student can go on.
I don't think there's a cap. I mean, as Bob said, we're trying to, like, if we have 10 spots for interviews, we're going to send out 10 invitations. We're not going to send out 11 invitations. And then if somebody declines an invitation, which, is something that is also appropriate and will be clarified within the language of the invitation, that you either are going to accept or decline that invitation, then that spot would be given to someone else.
And I think the other, and maybe this isn't exactly the question, but I'm going to rephrase it for students, is are programs, limited by the number of people they can interview by some overarching policy?
There's no policy. I mean, I think the size of the program frequently dictates, how many people are interviewed and how many days that they're interviewing on. So I think every program has a little bit different policy, so there's no kind of oversight on that. And I suspect, although I'm not sure, I mean, with the virtual capacity, there, may be more programs more interviews that are offered for programs this year than there were in person, but that, may not be true for all programs.
If we wait until Monday to accept interview offers, wouldn't we risk losing our preferred date to others who respond earlier?
No. It's really not designed to be a first come, first serve situation. So, these will be, depending again on the program and how many dates that they are offering, that they are going to try to accommodate everyone to the best of their ability. And frequently, as Jeff said, that they would be, okay, we're offering you an interview on this date. If you can't make this date, we have an alternative date.
And I think, if I can add a second, I think there's also some programs that if you can't follow the instructions, actually will look at that a little bit unfavorably. So for those that are trying to jump the gun on it, there will be some programs, maybe not all, but that will look and say, well, wait a minute, so couldn't follow that if they're one of those programs that they're trying to figure out, who to fill which date with. But just something to kind of keep in mind, because this is well disseminated among the programs.
And this is, remember, this is like usually one human coordinator who's trying their best to manage, a large group of people who want to get scheduled. So I think that we're trying to give some time for people to process and come up with a plan. I think that you have to, if you get a lot of interviews, that you should probably prioritize those programs that you truly want to interview at. And then, if when Monday comes, you can respond appropriately, but, please be mindful that these are, the coordinators who are helping to manage your entire residency process. So, you want to be very thoughtful and empathetic about the position that they're in, trying to coordinate everyone in a short period of time.
So I think we have two more questions on this topic, and then we'll kind of move on. So will the program coordinators email us to schedule, or are we expected to proactively email them with the preferred dates on Monday? We definitely don't want to overwhelm them.
Right, so there's been a little bit of some divergence. Some programs, some invitations will indicate which date that you're invited to interview on. Some will give you an option. You would be expected to accept or decline the invitation to interview. And if there's further discussion that needs to be about date adjustment, then that would be something that you could communicate in that email. But again, it's not in any way a first come, first serve situation.
And then kind of the last question before we move on to the other topic is, the ACAPS calendar shows 2 programs interviewing on December 5th. And is this correct? And does it mean we should respond to the coordinators on the 4th?
Which program is that?
So I just saw that question in the chat. I'm looking at it. Mount Sinai and University of South Carolina, they're both integrated programs, and they're scheduled to interview on the 5th. And then Geisinger is scheduled to interview on the 7th, which
So
that's a bit early.
what we can probably do through ACAPS is just make sure, because that calendar was made almost over a year ago, or a year ago, for the dates. So some programs may not have updated it to reflect the new virtual interview process. We can have the ACAPS administration make sure that everybody tries to update those dates by reaching out to all those programs. So some of those may be left over from when their previous in-person dates were supposed to be.
Okay, so with that, I know there's some other questions, and a lot of those are going to be hopefully answered by the next session. So Bob, I'm going to hand over you to talk a little bit about expectations of kind of what happens after the interviews are offered and accepted in that kind of period in December and January.
Thanks, Jeff. Again, I want to say hello to all of the applicants this year and tell you that we as program directors are in many ways just as nervous as you are, because this is our first time doing this virtually. It's our first time to have her tape with. So in that sense, we are very, very understanding of questions you have, of the uncertainties, and we are wide open to questions. One of the things that Bill will talk about is, why some of these policies were developed. And one of the things I want to let you know is that every single program coordinator and director that I have talked to really wants to make this work, really does have you in mind as we try to go through these things. We're not going to be perfect, but I have been impressed at how willing programs have been to work with the program, to work with our dates to try to make it better. So with that in mind, let's move forward on the calendar. December 4th comes, you get 12 to 15 invitations. Congratulations. On the 7th, you schedule them. What happens next? Well, the big difference this year, as you know, is the fact that everything is going to be virtual. And that has had a major effect on interviews in 2 ways. Number one, time and distance are no longer as big a factor as they used to be. When you used to have to fly somewhere or drive somewhere to be physically present, well, time is limited. And so programs were limited in the number of people they could interview. Interviewees were limited in the number of programs they could visit because of the time and distance factor. The other thing is cost. Airfare is expensive. Hotels are expensive. Providing the meals for everybody from a program. So cost was a limitation. So in the past, there were significant factors that served to limit the number of applicants and interviews. This year, many of those limits have been removed. So one of the things that we don't know is what's going to be the result. Are we going to have programs that used to interview, let's say 10 people per spot? Are they now going to interview 50 people per spot? The general feeling we get is no. In general, historically, the number is you interview 10 to 15 people for one spot, and the people that I've talked to are still looking at that same number. Now, what has happened as far as interviews are concerned is programs are doing it differently. Some programs are still going to have the traditional, let's have some kind of pre-meeting. And I'll use our program just as an example for the sake of conversation. We used to have a dinner the night before and a presentation. Well, we're not going to have the dinner, but we're still going to have a presentation the night before, and then the interviews the next day. many programs, as they've thought through this and as you look through, are going to have a similar pattern. And I think the reason for this is because people want to, it's what we're used to. And so with all the other variables, programs are trying to maintain as much continuity with years past as possible. So you may be given an opportunity to interview at a program where they have a night before gathering, information presentation, and then the next day is when you go through those interviews. And every program will be different. Some people are going to schedule one-on-one, one student with one faculty. Some are two-on-one, two faculty with one program. I would love to tell you that we have a uniform program that all programs are using, but we don't. Some are going to be using Zoom, some are going to be using Teams, some are going to be using Thalamus. Everybody's different, and you're really just going to have to figure out what each program is doing to find out how you sign in there. Each program will be as clear as possible in their communications of this is how you do it, this is when your times are. These are the people you call if you're having problems with, but we don't have a uniform interview platform. It will be different. So in that sense, you'll have your interview session. Most of those are going to be on one day. Now, here's what we have been trying to avoid, and Bill's going to talk more about this when he talks about the second look policy. One of the things that we have tried to avoid is any sense of pressure that you as an applicant have to attend everything that, Big State University is offering. So let's say you get an invitation to interview at Big State University, and you look on their website and they have virtual grand rounds in November, and then they have this virtual conference in December. What we have instructed programs to do is say, those are only intended for people who are actually doing rotations. So if you are scheduled to do a 2-week virtual rotation at Big State University, and there's a Grand Rounds conference during that time, please attend. But if you've just applied to Big State University, you're not doing a virtual rotation, and you happen to find out that there is a virtual Grand Rounds, that's not supposed to be open to you. And we've made it clear that there should be no expectations whatsoever of any program that applicants, in order to show their interest, show up at all these other functions. As clearly as we we've tried to communicate to protect you so that you don't feel like you have to show up at everything. So in the ideal world, you're going to get your invitation on the 4th, you're going to set up your schedule by the 7th, and then between now and that time, you don't necessarily need to do anything that Big State University is offering unless you're doing a rotation there. Then you go through Big State University's interview process, whether it's a night before and the next day, whether it's 2 days, whatever that process will be, you will go through that interview process and you'll do it virtually. And then when you're done, you're done. We have told programs that they are not to do a big batch screening process from which they then select a smaller few for a smaller group of interviews. Programs should not be doing that. So what I'm saying is they shouldn't have an interview on one day of 50 and then from that decide, oh, that was just our screening, that was our meet and greet, and now we're going to have our real interviews based on those 50 people. We're really going to interview 20. No program should be doing that. And then you have your interviews and you get ranked from there. So I think that's all I need to say. If I've missed anything, Bill, Amanda, Jeff, or Deborah jump in, or now I'm happy to answer questions.
Why don't, just for continuity, I'm going to hand it over to Bill to talk a little bit about the post-interview policy, and then we'll get to a bunch of the questions that are starting to come in relating to this policy. And Bill, I'm going to screen share for you here.
Thanks. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. I just want to kind of emphasize what everyone has tried to say. The interview process is the structure that's been set up is set up to try to make it as fair and equitable as possible. And there's no way to eliminate all the stress, but to make it less stressful for the applicants in particular. And the uniform release date, although it seems like it might be a mad rush over that weekend or over a few days, is so much better than the way it used to be, where programs would start issuing invitations in early October, and then you would accept those and the dates would be taken, and then you'd get invitation from another program later on the same date, and it just created a very long, drawn out chaos. And so the interview uniform release date has really been a very positive thing for the applicants. So what I was asked to talk about is the policy on post-interview communication that ACAPS has had in place for a long time is not changed. And so second look interviews are programs requiring you to come back to do a virtual sub-I or even an in-person sub-I if you're one of the medical schools that's allowed, is not prohibited. I'm sorry, is not allowed. It is prohibited. The program should not be contacting you for any reason, and you can contact the program coordinator for information, and you can contact the residents for our information, but those communications should not have any bearing or discussion about how you're being ranked, about how you intend to rank a program, and so on. So this might seem kind of draconian, and it actually is in some ways, but it is much to the benefit of the applicants, because it eliminates what used to occur, where programs would sort of pursue applicants which they wanted to rank highly in a way that was very problematic. And so once the interviews occur, we expect that the programs will not contact you, and you can contact them for information only.
Great. So a couple of questions. I'm going to kind of go back to the beginning of this. Can you comment on the appropriateness of having faculty mentors reach out to program directors on an applicant's behalf prior to December 4th? So kind of prior to the interview offer date.
So I'll render an offer on this one. What I'm understanding the question is can people talk to other people on your behalf? I wouldn't want to necessarily stop that, and I want to take a step back and answer the bigger question. As ACAPS organization, we are not trying to control everything. We are trying to give people as much freedom as possible. We're just trying to make it as easy and as equitable for the students as we can, but we're not going to try to come up with a policy for everybody to do everything, whether they're a program or a student. So with that in mind, the whole idea, if I have a student at my program who really wants to go to, I'll keep using this, big state university, and I know somebody there, I may very well call them. That's real life. Having a recommendation from somebody matters. That has never been forbidden in the past. I don't think it's going to be forbidden in the future, and I don't think I would want it to be. In fact, I think this year those kind of phone calls are going to be even more important than ever, because we haven't had a chance to meet you. One of the things that studies have shown in the past is that the most valuable predictor of a resident's fit is if the program director or somebody else calls somebody from the prior program and has a face-to-face conversation, says, hey, tell me about this person. That happens. And it's a valuable source of information. So we as ACAPS would not want to try to shut that down. So on the other hand, if somebody's going to call me about their applicant, I'm going to listen. I'm not going to say that, oh, well, you know, Jeff called me about somebody, and so therefore I'm going to offer them in an interview, but I'm going to listen to the information and then factor it in with everything else that I have on their application.
You know, in a similar vein, December 4th comes and as a student, you only have 2 interviews offered. And, you know, you're kind of waiting around for that second look. Thoughts on either faculty mentors reaching out and then the student reaching out to programs at that point?
Well, I'll just say that, you know, hopefully applicants all have good mentorship in their own, you know, institution or on a rotation that they have been able to do because their institution doesn't have a plastic surgery program. And those mentors are your best guide to that. I don't think a blanket statement is really possible. I think there are situations where it is appropriate for mentors to reach out. And I think that there are times when that may not be helpful. But hopefully all the applicants on this call have good mentorship, guidance from their own programs or from you know, people advising them. And I think that, as Bob said, it's a reality. We do talk to each other through the season about our own students from our own institutions. But I think that that's not something you should try to control necessarily, except to talk to your mentor about your preferences, where you would like to be.
Thoughts on the students reaching out directly?
Don't email me. We've interviewed, and I hate to say this, and it sounds abrupt and it sounds harsh, but we've invited the people that we want to invite. If you didn't get an invitation from our program, it's not because we forgot about you. It's not because you got lost. Unfortunately, you know, for whatever reason, you didn't make our invitation list. You know, so over that weekend, you know, I agree with Bill. Your first conversation should be with your mentor to say, okay, I only got 2 invitations. Where do we go from here? But emailing program directors, honestly, that could almost be counterproductive because they've done their due diligence. They've put together their lists.
So, and I'm going to jump around a little back to the end here, but there's a question just to be clear. So after an interview, are we not allowed to send a letter of intent?
So I will say that it's not that you're not allowed to, although the number of communications we get some years saying that students are super interested in our program and they're really intending to rank us very highly. And then, you know, they've obviously not been completely forthcoming and they end up matching someplace else. That is not obviously a good thing. And so, you know, I think thank you notes they're okay. I don't think they have a big effect, in my opinion.
I would say I actually think it's kind of against the policy. We get very, very few now. I mean, because I think this has come clear that thank you letters are not part of it. They are, you know, communication, and there isn't such a thing as a letter of intent. I think that goes back to the idea of communicating that, you know, you're my #1 program comment. So
I would definitely recommend not doing that. Don't do that.
Yeah, letter of intent, I would agree with Bill. You know, in the past, when we used to have the applicants over to our house for dinner the night before, people would send in, you know, thank you notes to my wife because she used to make the venison tamales. those sorts of things are fine. Thank you notes, some of us grew up in families where we can hear our mother in our head to look, hey, you didn't send a thank you note. Those are fine.
How many do you think you get a year? Because I gotta say, I mean, it is now less than one per year, at least on me, because I think that this policy, as it's pushed forward, while I recognize it's a headache for some and it goes against what their mother told them, it is definitely rare to get thank you notes and emails anymore, because I think this is as this is rolled out, everyone is accepting of the fact that that's just more of that communication and while kind, it's also unnecessary. But
another thing, and right, I grew up where not writing a thank you letter was a very big sin. So I fully understand that impulse, but also keep in mind that if you send a handwritten thank you letter, it might be weeks before it reaches the intended target, especially if it has to go through a mailroom. So the functional utility is also very low. People know that you are thankful. So you don't necessarily need to codify it.
So kind of going back, it's a little bit of the theme again, is it acceptable to show interest to programs by sending an email before the programs send out interviews to applicants? I guess since nobody else is jumping in, and I will tell you, I think at this point, it really doesn't make sense. In fact, I actually think it's a little bit, I don't want to say frustrating is the right word. I mean, we recognize everybody's very anxious about the whole process. But there was a fair amount of time this summer to express if they were interested in programs and communication. And I don't think any of the emails that we get at this point, and it's not really that many, are really sincere. They're half the time they feel like they've been sent to all 75 programs that are out there. So I'm not sure it helps. And if anything, it actually detracts a little bit from my view. Granted, I don't make all the decisions on interviews. We have a whole group process, but that's my opinions. We're at this point, those types of communications seem a little bit more grasping for straws, even though we recognize the challenge that this year places. But I'll let others share what their opinions are on it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I just agree. I agree. I think I don't think it's really super helpful at this point.
There is a question, what should people who are undergoing the couples match process do? Is it appropriate for them to email a specific program if their partner has interviewed there, which I think is an interesting twist on emailing or contacting programs. Thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, what I would say in my experience is usually if someone's, partner has someone in their couple matching with has interviewed in another residency program in our institution, and that program is very interested in that applicant, they will let us know. And I think that the applicant emailing us would have not a major impact. And I agree with what Jeff and Amanda. I think that those kind of emails, we're going to pick who we want to interview based on your credentials, which are in your application, your scores and your grades and your recommendations and your personal statement and all of that stuff on your CV. That's what's going to determine who we select for interviews, not that you emailed us and tell us you really, really, really love Ann Arbor, Michigan or whatever.
There's a question. Students have often have updates kind of mid-cycle, maybe another paper accepted for publication. Is this type of contact permissible before or after the interview if it's student initiated?
I think so. I mean, yes.
I think it would go to the program coordinator though as missing information. I will also say I have to say I think unless you won a Nobel Prize or something major, at that point in the game, kind of one publication or one new grade probably isn't going to change the overall impression for most of the programs as they go through the process. But if that's information, it would go to the program coordinator as kind of quote unquote missing information in your file.
Yeah, I agree. It's unlikely that it's probably going to make a difference or be factored in. So,
interesting question. If we do not have a home program, does this mean that we cannot contact faculty advisees?
I don't think that's true. I think that you have faculty mentors, you know, regardless of where you are in your institution. It can't be everyone at every institution, but certainly those people that you have a relationship with that have been, you know, kind of guiding you through the process, you can certainly communicate with them.
I'm seeing 4 heads nodding, plus I know my own is nodding. So I think there's universal agreement that as we've really worked hard for mentorship, especially for those students without direct plastic surgery at their institution, there's no question that those other folks that serve in that role are I'll say exempt from that policy. I mean, but the goal is that you're having that mentorship and advisee relationship. There's a question here related to independent programs and if they participate with the uniform interview offer. Amanda, I don't know if you know for sure.
Oh, yeah.
The independent.
Sorry. Yes,
program.
there is. So there's not a uniform release date. There is actually another slide, which we may have taken away, which may also have a typo. But the interview invitation release date for that is not one single date, but we do ask that the programs release the invitations before January 15th, 2021. So they don't all go out on one date, but we do ask that they go out before January 15th. But they would go out in a rolling basis.
There's a question, and I think this has to do with kind of second look days, but what about university or GME or, for example, Department of Surgery second look day or second kind of interaction that are not specific to plastic surgery? How does that fit within this policy? I don't know how many of those are going to be happening, but.
So plastic surgery is unique in that we're the only specialty that has this, which means there are other programs that do, and there are other institutions that may offer something for all of those programs. And I think what we've said is that, you know, if a particular university has something that is offered to all the different residents of all the different specialties, to kind of let somebody know this is what it's like to come to our university, this is what it's like to live in this area, this is what our university has to offer. If it's that kind of universal invitation to all applicants of all specialties, you know, we've said in the past that that's permissible because the program is not necessarily trying to contact you to judge your interest. The university is trying to provide you information to help you make the best choice. And so that kind of situation is going to be okay.
So kind of a question we've had a little bit before, and I'm going to have everyone give a yes or a no on this then. So this is regarding, again, thank you emails to interviewers. I've always been told these are a must and would feel rather nervous not sending them. Do you think any interviewers feel differently from you all and would penalize candidates for not sending one?
No.
No.
Won't send it.
I think another thing to consider when you think about the thank you letters is to think about what the process is. A lot of people have formed their opinions on the day of the interview. So by the time they would get a thank you letter days later, it may not have an impact on the outcome.
So question here, how do you express that you have regional ties even when it's not noted in your application, or does region not even matter?
I would, there was a study that came out in the general surgery literature on attrition rates in general surgery. And one of the interesting findings was a predictor of attrition was having family in the city in which you were a resident. And they didn't know why that was. Maybe you felt more confident because you had your family, or maybe your family was telling you to quit. But I think that that with that sort of data out there, having regional ties may or may not help you.
Well, let me comment. You know, I think that there are some regions where that may have some effect. You know, in the Midwest, you know, whether it's a reality or not, our perception is we are more successful at recruiting good applicants who have Midwest ties than people from either coast. You know, people from New York City or from LA, to try to recruit them to come to Ann Arbor, Michigan seems more daunting. So I think that that's the kind of thing that you indicate as far as your personal statement, maybe, you know, your letters of recommendation, and then during the interview process. I don't think anybody's going to select an interviewee because they happen to be from, you know, the local area, but certainly it's something that is appropriate for discussion during interviews.
Yeah, I think you know, there is some data correlating, you know, residency location with some geographic ties and plastic surgery, and I think it does matter for certain parts of the country, and I think that's going to be evident in your application, whether, you know, where you went to school or where you're from. So I don't think there's any additional communication that needs to take place, because if it's not as significant as it would show up in your application, then it's probably not something that's going to, you know, really be a big consideration.
So a couple questions here. Do programs have to announce how many interview invites they will offer?
No.
Admittedly, a semi-unrelated question, but I think it's important. I apologize. I'm sorry. I have heard from residents that programs are no longer allowed to use or view the applicant's headshots to associate with applications. Is this an ACAPS policy or just a program-specific policy?
That is not an ACAPS policy.
That was something that came through, you know, the ACG or the through ARAS actually initially.
I don't know. I have to be honest. I don't review our applications initially, so I haven't looked at any applications yet this year. But so were the photos, the headshots removed by ERAS, or is this just something that some programs are trying to do to minimize?
They default now. I think this started last year. It defaults to hiding your photo, so you can unmask photos. So it's at the discretion of programs, but I think, you know, there's, you know, pros and cons of either way, but, you know, in an attempt to try to, you know, make things potentially more equal, they removed the visibility of the photo as a default.
There's a question here, a little bit unrelated, but how does ACAPS support IMG applicants this year?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. ACAPS resources are available to any and all students who are interested. ACAPS encourages people from all kinds of training backgrounds, kinds of life backgrounds to apply into plastic surgery. We don't have specific support set up for any one particular group. And ACAPS does not run the match program or ERAS or anything like that.
Also, I think the only thing that was one of the webinars earlier this year we did have a set of panelists who were international medical graduates that shared their experiences specific to that. And that wasn't a promotion or anything other than just making sure we provide information and exposure for those, but that should be available on the website. If not, we can make sure it's up. So with that, another quick question. Great. Do programs, or I'm sorry, are programs interviewing around kind of the holiday New Year season?
Well, I'm looking at what's on the ACAPS website, and I see the last one, 12/19, and the next one, January 4th. So that's the answer I would give.
Yeah, I don't think in any years past anybody has interviewed in that window in that time. So, so that tried to address all the questions in the chat and the Q&A. We've got 7 minutes left, so if there's any final questions that you want to pop up, please do. Amanda, I don't know if you have any kind of final thoughts after tonight's discussion.
I would just, we will, try to, on the ACAP side and the program side, I'm working actually with the coordinators to put together some language so it will be a standard, or at least our recommendation will be to programs for it to be as standardized as possible for the invitation letters that go out to minimize some of the confusion. But I know this is an incredibly anxious time period, and that we really are trying to do our best to kind of pump the brakes a little bit on it so that you can be thoughtful about where you want to interview and where it's going to be the best fit. And at this point it is going to be a little bit more challenging year for all of us, but we're very open to your feedback, and please let us know how we can make the process better from your perspective. And from ACAPS, we will likely again, kind of send out a survey to get that input, and that we really do listen to your voice. So encourage you to respond to that so that we can continue to improve.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on that. We are planning on sending out through the listserv that was used. There will be a survey tool that we really hope you guys will take the time to fill out. This is obviously the first year this has been developed by us and by almost any other specialty in the country. And so we're still learning and how to do this better moving forward. So I know you're going to have lots of time on the computer with all the interviews, but if you can take the time to fill that out and look through kind of the different programming, that'll be really helpful. Before we go on to some other final thoughts, a couple last questions are popping up here. Can anyone comment on interview format?
Yes, it's going to be multiple. It's not going to be standardized, and we're all going to be figuring out as we go along. There's just not a standardized format. And then,
do you have any recommended backgrounds or virtual interview settings from an ACAPS perspective?
No.
I think there was some, good information that went out about, techniques for virtual interviewing and trying to, set yourself up for success, or, without, a virtual background if you can, and, optimizing your lighting. And I think we have that as one of the recorded webinars, right?
Yeah, that may have been the one that I think we misrecorded part of it, but there's a ton of information out there on how to best set up your virtual interview in terms of backgrounds as well.
I think there's also, I think we posted something about it also on the Instagram.
Yeah.
Yes, there is one question. Oh, go ahead, Deborah.
One thing that I would encourage everybody to do is practice. Do a practice Zoom session with a friend, with a family member, with a mentor, to practice your lighting, practice how you present on screen, because it's a little different than in person.
I will say, and Shayla just posted in the chat part, but the slides from Bernie Lee, who gave that talk, are on the ACAPS website, kind of focused on how to best set up your background and your lighting, etc.
Jeff, there is one question about the interview process that I do want to address quickly.
Sure.
I've had two separate students ask me, am I allowed to go visit a program? The idea being we're going to spend 6 years someplace and I may never visited the geography. Can I go visit? We've had this discussion very informally. And I think our answer as ACAPS would be, you can't go visit anywhere formally. If you want to go visit someplace you're going to go to, we've instructed program directors they're really not supposed to have contact with you, that you're not supposed to be doing away rotations. You know, if you want to get on an airplane or go in a car and go visit, you know, a location, nobody's going to stop you. And I can see why you might want to. But if you're going to go there and then just hope that you happen to run into somebody in the hospital, or, well, hey, I happen to be in the area, I'm going to go and see if Dr. So-and-so is in, that would not be permissible. You know, there are people that have really good friends that have gone to a place and you want to go visit them and see what it's like. Again, our goal is to be honest. And if you have a really good friend that's going there and you're thinking about going there, where you're going to live for 6 years is a reasonable question. But if you're going to go there and expect that person to introduce you to all the other residents, and hey, let me have you meet Dr. So-and-so, that should not be happening.
Not to mention with what's happening with COVID likely in the next month and a half, probably strongly seen in a negative light in terms of our goals of minimizing any interpersonal contact of any version.
Yeah.
There's a question, will programs that have not established interview dates consider the dates posted on ACAPS? There's multiple dates with a significant amount of overlap. And, you know, I think the answer is here again, each program's going to do their own thing in terms of the dates. One of the, I think, really great things, and Dr. Gossman and Dr. Weber were really two people that pushed this last year, is this common interview date. Is it then you have the weekend to lay it all out for yourself. You're always going to have to make choices, you know, or hopefully you're going to be able to, you're going to have the opportunity to make choices between programs. But at least now you're not responding to one and then having to cancel. You'll have all of your offers, you'll know what they are, and then you can see exactly what they are. We've tried to keep the ACAPS website up to date. It is a moving target this year as all the programs have had to adjust to lots of different things, and probably will continue to have to adjust, at least as the current trends are happening with you know, things nationally in the epidemic and the pandemic. So that is the great part about this. The way this is set up is you'll have everything laid out so you can make your priorities, and then, you know, you can try to work in your second choices through the alternative dates, et cetera. I think some programs are willing to work with you on that if possible, but at least you can make your priorities first. So Bill, any final thoughts here?
I don't think so. I mean, just to reemphasize, you know, this has been set up in a way to try to be as fair to the applicants and the programs, and the interview release date and the policies on a second look are intended to, as I said, make the playing field as equal for everybody, even for everybody.
Deborah?
Yeah, I think the thing to keep in mind about these policies is that they were all generated from perceived or actual inequities in the system. And so that's the idea. The idea is to help make everything fair.
Bob, as the president of ACAPS, I'm going to let you have the final parting advice moving forward.
You know, most people are honest. Most programs are trying to do right things. Most of the applicants are trying to do the right thing. And I would say, you know, if you find yourself facing a decision, be honest with yourself and do what you think the right thing is. You know, a thank you card. You know, if a program coordinator really helped you because something came up and you want to express thanks because you're genuinely thankful, please be honest and express genuine thanks. If you want to let somebody know that you're interested because you're hoping in some way or another that makes you more palatable to a program, don't. But in these times, again, I'm going to say, you know, trust your honesty, trust our honesty. People are going to do that. And if all else fails, it's always easy to say, you know what, I was just trying to be honest, and I did this in the best of motives, you know, of care, of compassion, and we're going to make it through this.
All right, with that, best of luck, everybody. If there's any dramatic changes in anything moving forward, we will continue to communicate through the listserv. If there's anything from ACAPS that you know, changes in the near future, but otherwise, best of luck. Please reach out if there's anything that we can do to help you, moving forward. And I look forward to, at some point, having you all as colleagues down the road as plastic surgeons.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jeff and Deborah, for putting this together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome job.
Have a good evening.
Good night, all.
Good night. Take care. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Shayla.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.